it turns out, you see, that the heart itself has an intelligence. It has a brain.
Yes.
It had nerve cells which are
Yes.
connected to the brain up here.
Yeah.
And what's happened in the West is that that connection has been largely silenced.
Yeah.
Um, so that now we need to convince our intellects what the heart already knows. Let me tell you about a study that I ran across writing my new book. This is gonna, you're sitting down, I trust, because otherwise you would fall off in amazement if I told you this.
Yeah.
Uh, this research study, I don't know how many
Yeah.
PhDs it took to figure this one out.
Yeah.
They did some research, and you know what they learned?
What?
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
They learned that grandmothers are good for grandkids.
You
And
know,
this, and you know what else they found out? This is even more astonishing. That the closer the grandmother lives, lives to the child, the better.
oh, I even in my own little informal study, I've seen that those people who've had grandparents nearby
Yeah,
tend to have more secure identities.
absolutely.
And yeah, and the more mothers, the better. And the
Yeah,
more that the boys and the uncles and
yeah.
grandfathers can be mothers, the better they are and the happier they are.
Well, but here's what happens. I mentioned that care system in the brain,
Yeah.
but these instinctual systems need to be evoked by the environment.
Yes.
And when they're not, they just kind of attenuate and they shut down.
Yes.
So when a boy is taking care of a little one, his care system is actually building.
Yes.
And so that neurologically and neurophysiologically, he'd then be more prepared to be nurturing. So, and what this society does is in the parenting advice, it doles out to young mothers and fathers, and in the stresses that it places the family under, it actually attenuates our parenting instincts
Yeah.
so that we parent contrary to instinct. It's the social environment and the physical environment that actually programs the brain. It's not just our genes. When you have a system that actively undermines the social network and destroys communities because it throws people out of jobs without any thought to the impact of what that will have on a local community. When a Walmart can come in and obliterate small local businesses, that has huge impact on people's connection to each other and therefore on their health. I'm talking as a physician. What we're seeing is an epidemic of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, chronic illnesses, um, real epidemic of mental health conditions amongst the youth, increased youth suicide, depression, anxiety. Children are being diagnosed with all manner of this or that disorder, all of which actually reflect the consequences of a system that denies children's developmental needs and fails to provide children or adults with a healthy, connected environment. And that has to do with the exigencies of neoliberal economics.
Yeah, and we've got to start by just looking at GDP, and that means we have to go deeper than neoliberal. We actually have to look at the industrial modern economy where nations measure success through GDP, and GDP is a measure of breakdown. It increases with ill health. It increases with pollution. I just feel every self-respecting anybody has got to start being willing to look at that economic trajectory and at the economic system as the main driver of all the destruction we're seeing. Hopefully people will feel from this conversation that it's helpful to know that this emanates from an economic system. It does not come from human nature. It's not
No.
human being. Don't believe that propaganda. Wake up instead to the need to change the economy.
The one thing I do hope people get from this conversation is there's other ways of conceiving what humanity is all about. And now we've been, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, propagandized is one word, but it's even more subtle than that. We've been
Yeah.
educated or imbued with
Yes.
a certain view that doesn't actually match reality. And it's that gap between who we are fundamentally and who we're made to be in this globalized culture that creates so much illness and so much dysfunction and so much unhappiness and so much despair, actually.
have you seen examples that give you, that, make your heart sing and give you hope?
Well, I do, and I write about them. Amazing stories of healing that happen. And it's usually, and I've documented this, but actually it's also been documented by other researchers that even in certain conditions that are considered to be terminal and Western medicine can't offer anything more, people actually come back and they heal. And this has been studied by a physician called Jeff Rediger from Harvard. I just wrote a book last year called Cured, an oncological psychologist called Kelly Turner in her book Radical Remission. And I've talked to both of these people, and what they say is that the fundamental healing agent, alchemic agent, is actually a transformation of one's inner identity from that socialized, isolated view that this society promulgates to somebody who's much more expansive and connected, and connected to the whole universe, actually. And that has a physiological impact sufficient in some cases to reverse fatal illnesses. And I'll tell you one more story. A colleague of mine, a physician, psychiatrist, I'm not a psychiatrist, he is. His name is Louis Mel Madrona, and he lives in the States, and he's of Lakota indigenous background in part. And he said in the Lakota tradition, when somebody gets ill, it's not seen as an individual isolated event, that the community actually gathers around him and they say to him, we realize that your illness represents some dysfunction, some rip in the fabric of our community. So thank you for taking that on. And we're here to help you heal so that we can all heal ourselves. So they see the healing not as which actually, healing arises from the root word for wholeness. And so they see the healing not as an individual biological event, but as a communal, biological, psychological, spiritual event, which is a very different way of looking at it. And it's far more scientifically accurate, actually.
Yeah, amazing. I would like to put it in the way of listening more to your heart and your experience, to hear, for instance, keep repeating what we said about grandmothers and how scientists had to prove that having a grandmother nearby is good for a grandchild. It's waking up your body, your heart, and your experiential knowledge to listen to the truth that we need one another, that we are caring, needing people, that we also have some models from indigenous traditional cultures. And what that has to do with is the humanity, is the human scale, the human interconnectedness, the fact that you depended on people whose name you knew, people you could speak to. You weren't dependent on an anonymous institution, either a giant government or giant corporations that you don't even know the names of. We depended on one another. And that is what localized structures can bring us. And it's doing that right now. I mean, we're actually seeing benefits on a small scale. I'm so heartened by this upsurge everywhere you look, almost always led by women, by the way, but these smaller scale food systems that keep rising and keep coming back, even though they're stomped on by the dominant system, by our laws, regulations, and a completely fake economy where dead food from the other side of the world is cheaper than local, fresh, organic food. But despite that, the sort of building of those systems are so real and so healing for people and the planet. And so I'm really grateful to you for supporting that movement and for everything you've done. It seems that all your books and everything you stand for is in support of that life-based system and a rejection of the deadly monoculture which is killing us.
First of all, everything I understand about human beings, everything I learned about human beings and human life and development would predict the success of these enterprises that you're talking about.
Yeah.
For all manner of social, psychological, physiological reasons.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised when you tell me this micro successes or these major successes on the micro level. You know?
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.